Evelyn explained that she met the man and he had a large sack with him, and then told her he had part of John in the sack. Welcome to the Brothers in Crime podcast.
We are brothers.
We talk about true crime.
We don't take ourselves too seriously.
And you shouldn't either. From Jim Carrey to Justin Bieber, Alanis Morissette to Avril Lavigne, we've got hockey and maple syrup. Bob, you know where we are yet?
I sure do. You're in that damn fraud of a country. Canada tries to pass off freaking ham as Canadian bacon.
Just like Hawaiian pizza, this case comes to us from the Great White North. Specifically, this case took place in Hamilton, Ontario in the 1940s. Around that time, the population was right around 250,000 people. Hamilton is just a quick drive around Lake Ontario, about a half an hour southwest from Toronto. A local newspaper called The Spectator described this case as the most sensational homicide it covered in its 170-year history. One of the paper's reporters, Mark McNeil, once wrote about the case, saying, Shakespeare would have loved the story of Evelyn Dick. The 1946 torso murder, as it's known, was rife with drama, gore, greed, scandal, sex, and mystery. And even now, the case still ignites passionate feelings in the community. On March 16, 1946, 5 little Canadian kids were out doing what kids do in an area called Albion Falls when they stumbled across what they initially thought was a dead headless pig.
Are headless pigs like a special Canadian thing? Like Canadian bacon?
Right. No, that's not where Canadian bacon comes from. I mean, I guess it could be, but these kids were in for a pretty startling surprise. The pig that they had found was not a pig at all. It was actually part of a body, a human's body, a headless and limbless torso that had been dumped off the side of one of these steep hills in that area about 10 days prior. Without a head or hands to work with, identification was a bit more challenging than normal. But eventually, a cyst on the torso's posterior and an undescended testicle helped investigators identify the torso as 39-year-old John Dick, a Hamilton Street Railway streetcar and bus driver. His wife Evelyn, who he had married only 6 months before, quickly became the prime suspect. And before we get too far into all that, let's back up and talk a bit about John and Evelyn. Did you know that Canada has its own encyclopedia? Like, the government actually publishes this thing called the Canadian Encyclopedia, and it's got over 25,000 articles, and this case is in there.
I guess I believe it, but a government-published encyclopedia, I would trust that about as much as an elevator ride with Ray Rice, or Mexican tap water for drinking, or someone saying I didn't inhale.
That's fair. Well, as much as we don't trust it, they're really proud of it. Like, I'll link the encyclopedia in the show notes. But when you read their little blurb about it, they boast to the fact that they're one of the few countries in the world that have their own encyclopedia.
Now, wait a minute. There's plenty of countries that publish propaganda.
Well, in their propaganda, somebody's not gonna like this. Evelyn McLean was born on October 13th, 1920 in Beamsville, Ontario. Evelyn was the only child of Scottish immigrants Donald and Alexandra McLean. The year after her birth, the McLean family moved to Hamilton, where Donald worked for the Hamilton Street Railway. The McLeans lived beyond their means. They even sent Evelyn to this place called the Loretto Academy, which is like this private Catholic school for girls. Again, the Canadian Encyclopedia, they explain her father like this. They say, quote, Donald, an abusive alcoholic, supplemented his modest income by stealing money from the HSR vault.
I guess if they're putting that in the official encyclopedia, he must be really doing something else.
Yeah, it gets worse.
No, of course it does.
And that encyclopedia also says that as Evelyn grew into an attractive young woman, and I'm quoting here, her mother encouraged Evelyn to use her good looks to entice men into buying her expensive gifts, such as jewelry and furs.
Oh, fancy don't let me down.
Bingo. This is a very kind way of saying that once Evelyn hit about 14 years old, her family had no problem pimping her out. Other sources have described her as an escort or prostitute, their words, not mine. And I think in this instance, especially, I take a little bit of issue with that characterization. I think having your parents push you into sex work sounds more like you're a victim of child abuse than an escort, in air quotes.
Well, absolutely. I mean, so you said as an escort or prostitute. It's interesting they make a distinction there. You know what the difference is, really?
I don't know. What do you got?
About $100. But seriously, I smelled that coming as soon as you said about her being attractive and she was encouraged to use her good looks to, get gifts and stuff. Like, nailed that one. And no, pimping out your kid, turning them out, not cool at all. Not cool at all.
Yeah, I agree. It's pretty disgusting, and it's just sort of this harbinger of what's to come. So Evelyn's lovers, and I'm using that term very just, yeah, I hate this. I hate all this. But understand that, so this starts when she's a young girl, a child. But, given that she's sort of, this is what her parents have had her do, and it's kind of what she knows, it continues on into her adulthood. And so as she, becomes an adult, then she kind of continues on with this. And so the men that she spent time with included several wealthy and prominent Hamiltonians. So I just want you to hang on to that, okay?
Okay.
In July of 1942, Evelyn gave birth to a daughter, Heather Maria White. The last name White was from a fictitious father to hide the fact that Evelyn was an unwed mother. She told people that Heather's father was a man named Norman White, who was from Cleveland and in the Navy. Evelyn also gave birth to a baby who was stillborn the following summer in 1943. And then in September of 44, you notice in a trend here, Evelyn gave birth to a boy whom she named Peter. But when she returned home from the hospital, she didn't have Peter with her. She told her family and everyone else that she had given him up to the Children's Aid Society for adoption because her father didn't want another child in the house. And this has been reported as him being quoted apparently telling her he wasn't going to have another bastard in his house.
Oh.
Yeah, he was, remember, abusive alcoholic, according to the Canadian Encyclopedia. So this guy's a piece of work. I mean, and he's pimping out his daughter at 14. So,
right.
No Father of the Year award ever in this guy's life. It's not disputed that her father was, obviously not happy when she brought Heather home. And so it's not surprising to learn that he didn't want any more kids in the house. Also, at that time, we got to remember, right, we're talking about the 40s, even in Canada, right, being an unwed mother, and putting that term in quotes, that was kind of a big deal. I think our mom even caught some flack for that because of you, didn't she?
Well, I mean, just because I was at our parents' wedding doesn't mean anything.
But
this poor girl, I mean, she was pregnant for like 3 years straight. And then, having a stillborn child, that's awful. And she had one, oh my. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. So fast forward to the summer of 1945. Evelyn meets a man named John Dick. John was born May 25th, 1906, in Halmstad, Russia. He'd arrived in Ontario in 1924 with his parents, one of numerous German-speaking Mennonites fleeing the Russian Revolution. His family lived in the Vineland-Beamsville area. Then in the 1940s, John moved to Hamilton for work. In June of 1943, he landed a job with that HSR as a bus and streetcar driver.
So he's working at the same place as railroad deal as Evelyn's dad, and they both work as bus drivers and streetcars or streetcar drivers.
Yeah, so they're both involved in, they work for the same place. And Evelyn's dad, I think maybe he had some various jobs. I'm not sure exactly what he was doing at this point in time. I believe that at least at some point he was a streetcar driver, just like John became, but I'm not sure. He might have moved into more of like an office role or something, because remember, according to the Canadian Encyclopedia, he had taken some money from the vault. So I'm not sure that the drivers would have had access to that by the time he was doing that.
Okay.
But
gotcha.
Same company, same industry, all that stuff, exactly. So also, let's just kind of back up a little bit. John was 39 when he and Evelyn met in the summer of 1945. So just to point it out, right, he's 15 years older than Evelyn. Not that that doesn't happen or that's a big deal. But given the age difference, I think it's important to note that, because unfortunately for John, Evelyn had mistakenly believed that he was loaded and could support her extravagant lifestyle. That was not the case. In 1945, Evelyn bought a house at 32 Carrick Avenue in Hamilton. And the house is still there today. It's a charming, decent-sized house that she reportedly was able to procure all on her own.
Go, girl.
Right? Get your bag. The deed was solely in her name, and reports were that she put the down payment money on the house all by herself with no other sources, no help from anybody, despite the fact that she wasn't getting any W-2s or, whatever the Canadian equivalent of that is, I assume. Essentially, she didn't have any job she was paying taxes on.
Oh, okay. Yeah, which means she didn't have any legitimate income, I guess, that you could pay taxes on.
Right. Yeah, she had one of those cash businesses. So when Evelyn and John started talking, she told him that she was the widow of a Canadian naval officer named White, who had died in World War II. After just a few weeks, Evelyn and Dick were engaged. On October 4th, 1945, John and Evelyn tied the knot in a small ceremony against the wishes of her parents. In fact, Evelyn's parents disapproved of John so much that they refused to and did not attend the small wedding ceremony. Now, Time magazine, writing about the case in 1946, noted, quote, "No one knew why Evelyn McLean, 26, sultry-eyed, black-haired, good-looking, had married John Dick, 40, a Hamilton, Ontario tram driver. The only explanation she gave was that, quote, he was a lovely fellow. He used to call and help me with the dishes. He brought soap chips." Nor did there seem to be much reason why hardworking John Dick had married her.
No, I know why.
Yeah, I mean, that part, I think it's pretty obvious why he married her. I don't know why Time had trouble figuring that out.
Right.
I mean, they explained it pretty well whenever they said she was 26, sultry-eyed, black-haired, good-looking. I think that's really all old Johnny Dick needed.
Right.
So the marriage would be short-lived. I mean, you joke about your first wife, but this one, whew, the couple fought incessantly pretty much from the jump.
What the hell do they have to argue about? I mean, even if you marry a horrible person, usually you don't see it in the beginning. So you got that honeymoon period where even the spawn of Satan seems like they're not so bad.
Yeah, exactly. But what if I told you that Evelyn was shacking up with one of her old boyfriends within days of getting married to John?
I mean, I'm not terribly surprised, but how do we know that? Is this according to John, the other guy, or the Canadian Encyclopedia?
Well, it would be from Evelyn herself. She told the police that she slept with her boyfriend, Bill Bohozik, just a few days after marrying John. And about 3 months into the marriage, John and Evelyn separated.
Damn, that's a quick one.
Yeah, right? And I mean, it's straight from the horse's mouth. So basically, as soon as Evelyn realized that Dick was not financially well off, like she mistakenly had believed, she deserted him and just went to shacking up with that boyfriend, Bill Bohozik. Nonetheless, which remember his name, because we're going to get back to him, poor John believed that he and Evelyn could still somehow make their marriage work, and they spent some time living together in that house on Carrick Avenue. All of their time together was stormy, especially because of Evelyn's relationships with Bohozik and other boyfriends. And this was a recurring theme with many fellas. And like you said, given her past and what she'd been through and how she was raised, it's kind of not hard to see that coming, right? But after a short time, John moved out of the Carrick house, because remember, it's in Evelyn's name and only her name.
She ain't no dummy.
Yeah, she ain't stupid. And he moved in with one of his cousins. Now, according to that Canadian Encyclopedia, quote, John appealed to Evelyn's father, Donald McLean, for help in making her behave like a respectable wife. I don't know what that means. When McLean refused, Dick threatened to inform on him for stealing from the HSR, a McLean family secret that Evelyn had revealed to him. McLean then threatened to kill Dick, which Dick reported to the Hamilton police.
Oh, damn.
Now, John disappeared in the first week of March 1946. He was last seen alive on March 6th in a Hamilton restaurant.
Well, imagine that. So Dad threatened to kill him, and now he's dead. So Dad seems like a good suspect. Or maybe did he get turned into some kind of Canadian bacon in that restaurant?
Right. Yeah, so Dad certainly is looking pretty good. The cousin that John was staying with reported him missing. And when the torso was found and they figured out it was John...
Because the one nut hadn't dropped?
Right. They immediately were interested in Evelyn, and they brought her into police headquarters for questioning. I don't think any of them could have even tried to expect or anticipate what she would say. When the police told her that the torso was her husband, she remarked, "Don't look at me. I don't know anything about it." Now, I could see you responding that way about your ex-wife, but not your current one.
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, I wouldn't respond at all about anything. I want my lawyer.
Evelyn then proceeded to tell a story about a well-dressed Italian hitman kind of guy who showed up to her house one day looking for John. He told her that he was going to fix John for messing around with his wife, and then he left without telling Evelyn who he was.
All right, so John's screwing around on her. That kind of got flipped quick, and we're just going with the mob, did it?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, that's her first story, and I'll say first to kind of tip my hat a little bit. Days later, the police learned that Evelyn had borrowed a large Packard car from a man named Bill Landig. In case you don't know, this Packard was a luxury automobile manufacturer, I think sort of like, old school Cadillac kind of deal, right? And they made cars from 1899 to 1954.
It ain't French. It's called a Packard. Like literally, it's a Packard, not a Packard.
Okay, whatever.
They can call it whatever they want up in Canada. But so what's the big deal? She borrowed a big car. First of all, every car was big back then. But I mean, she's a working girl, needed a whip. Sounds innocent to me.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's important to note, right? Like there were none of those little tiny two-seater, environmentally friendly joints back then. Like every car was essentially a boat on wheels.
Right. I mean, Enterprise was out of Teslas that week.
Right. So, yeah, but to the point of why this matters, it matters because Landig told police that when his car was returned, the front seat was covered in blood, the seat covers were missing, and there was some bloody clothing in the back.
Oh, well, why didn't this Landig fella go to the police right away?
See, Evelyn left a note saying that her daughter, Heather, remember, had cut herself and made a mess. And even though this was the 40s, they had blood typing. So the investigators, now that Landig had come forward, quickly got on this, and they were able to establish that the blood that was in the Packard, which, I don't know, maybe that is how you say it. I have no idea. I just assumed that the blood was the same type as John's. Now, I have not been able to track down anywhere that conclusively says that John and Heather had different blood types, but it's always presented in a way that this is like an important point of the investigation where they matched the blood to John, and then they were able to use that in their conversations with Evelyn. So either they just led her to believe that because it matched John, that was significant enough, or her blood type was different. I'm not sure. Either way, this is another turning point in the investigation where once they confront Evelyn with the fact that this blood matched John's blood type, she changed her story. Now she told police that a mysterious man had called her, told her John made a woman pregnant, and that he was getting what was coming to him. The man then asked her to meet so that he could borrow a car. Evelyn explained that she met the man and he had a large sack with him, and then told her he had part of John in the sack. So, what would you do if a stranger showed up with a sack that contained part of your spouse?
Which spouse? Because there may be different paths we go down there.
All right, well, before you incriminate yourself any further,
I don't want any part of any of them. It just one would be much more upsetting than the other.
well, if you're Evelyn, you drive this strange man that you don't know who has some part of your husband and his cargo in his sack to a dumping site. The same dumping site where those kids found John's torso.
Well, that sounds like a clue.
Right. Evelyn took police on the route that she claimed they had followed. When asked if it was at all alarming to her that her husband's body was in the vehicle, she said she wasn't happy about his demise, but, it was a, quote, pretty mean trick to break up a home, referring evidently to the woman who her husband had allegedly impregnated.
I'm calling bullshit on that.
Still, she emphatically denied conspiring to kill her husband. Police found her responses and demeanor to be incredibly inappropriate. And later, Evelyn changed her story again and signed a second statement regarding the involvement of Italian killers hired by her boyfriend, Bill Bohozic. While Evelyn was giving revolving statements, investigators at the Carrick Avenue residence made a gruesome discovery: a beige suitcase in an attic trunk. The suitcase was filled with concrete.
Oh, damn. I don't like where this is going.
It's worse than you think.
Worse. If there's a dog in that suitcase, I'm out of here.
It's worse.
But you can finish this episode by yourself, damn it. I didn't sign up for this. What the hell? I don't want to know what's in that concrete suitcase. If she done got rid of the dog,
So when police cracked open the concrete in the suitcase, they discovered the remains of a baby boy. Peter David White, Evelyn's son, who she said she had given up for adoption.
What the hell? Okay, this woman is nuts and a sicko.
Yeah. So Alexandra McLean, right, Evelyn's mom, told police that she had seen her husband at this trunk the day before, and he told her to get the hell out of the room. Faced with this turn of events and having been told that Bohozik had been brought in for questioning, Evelyn told yet another story. She said that Bill Bohozik had murdered the child and John Dick as well.
Oh, dear Lord. So now the mafia isn't involved at all, and the strange guy that shows up with part of the husband, that's all not a thing anymore now?
Yeah. So she just, flippy floppied all around. But incriminating evidence like bullet holes in a pipe, a revolver that matched the caliber of wounds to John's body, cartridges that matched Saul's and blood-stained shoes that were almost certainly John's shoes found in Donald McLean's basement were pretty problematic for Evelyn and her father. In the backyard of Evelyn's home, police found bits of human bones mixed with some cinders from the furnace, which to them indicated that some parts of him had been burned up in the fireplace and then the ashes had been thrown outside. The bloody clothing left in that Packard that she borrowed was consistent with John's HSR uniform. Evelyn, the McLeans, and Bohozik were charged with the murder of John Dick. Evelyn and Bohozik were charged with infanticide as well. Donald McLean was also charged with robbing the HSR of thousands of dollars. At Evelyn's trial, hundreds of Hamiltonians carrying their lunches lined up and pushed and shoved to watch the proceedings. I mean, I've seen pictures. This was clearly a big deal. The photographs of the hordes of people gathered outside. I mean, you can tell this was like, every source I've reviewed describes this as one of the most grisly and infamous cases in Canadian history.
What kind of people were gathered outside? What did you say was gathered outside?
Hordes.
Oh, with a D. Hordes.
Yeah.
Oh, there were hordes gathered outside. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Not whores. Hordes.
I thought maybe coworkers had come to show support.
Well, I know my pronunciation is a little off today, so maybe I misspoke. But
well, I can't blame Packard on you because I'm sure you've never seen one, and they were out of business long before, a long, like you said, a long time ago.
Yeah, back when you were a kid in the 1950s.
Right.
Oh, goodness. So Time Magazine's article that I've referenced already, and it's an interesting read. It ran shortly after the trial, at least the one that I'm referencing. And they described the scene like this, right, of the trial. Quote, meticulously, the Crown, and in case you're wondering, that's like what we would say the state, the prosecution, the prosecutor.
Oh, I thought it was a Crown Royal reference. Okay.
So meticulously, the Crown paraded such revolting exhibits as Evelyn's blood-soaked galoshes, 60 little neatly labeled boxes of bones and bits of teeth. Evelyn's mother told how she had once questioned Evelyn about John Dick's disappearance, was told that John was dead, and to keep her mouth shut. Evelyn did not act like a woman on trial for her life. She yawned, drew sketches. In her cell between sessions, she burbled delightfully. I get salmon salads, everything I like. She asked for magazines. Love stories, lots of them. She got fan mail, a dozen carnations, a card reading, happy returns. She concocted several versions of how her husband had been killed. First, it was by a gang from Windsor, then by a gang hired by Bohozik. Her final and corrected version was that Dick had been killed by Bohozik himself under the prodding of her father, who paid him $300 or $400 and lent him a gun because he hated John's guts. In some of the versions, she admitted that she had driven the car, as charged, and had a hand in disposing of the body.
Well, okay, so the dad had already threatened to kill this dude, so there's that, but I didn't hear where this Bohozik fellow, where there's any evidence against him other than one of 27 versions of her story.
Yeah, that's fair. Let's put a pin in that. We're going to come back to that in a minute. But first, I want to talk about something that's just an interesting tidbit. Do you remember earlier I mentioned Evelyn, she, based on her profession or what she was forced into, and depending on how old she was and all that. Anyway, she had slept with a number of men, essentially, and that included some prominent men in the area. Remember that?
Yeah.
Okay, well, during the trial, there was some questioning with regard to baby Peter. Because remember now, she's accused Bohozik of being the one who did it. And so in an attempt to kind of show that, it wasn't him, it was her, because she's the one on trial right now, there's this line of questioning. So can you do your best, Evelyn Dick, and I'll be the Crown, which is the prosecutor for those of us who split up with England in 1776. The questioning went like this. Is it not a fact that the father of that child could have been any one of 400 men in this city?
No, not that many.
300 men, then?
Well, no.
Tell the court how many men you've had sexual intercourse with then.
Maybe 150.
Miss Dick, I want you to name these men for the court right now. Who are they?
Well, his son, for one.
Were you indicating his honor?
Yeah, the judge's son.
It should come as a surprise to nobody that the judge proceeded to issue a restraining order preventing newspapers from publishing the names Evelyn revealed during the proceedings.
Oh, that's dirty. I mean, at this point, I don't know. The judge might need to be recusing himself.
Yeah. I don't know how Canadian law works, but I knew you'd find that interesting. So now, again, the way Time covered the conclusion of the trial is pretty good. So they report that after 9 days and 42 witnesses, the case went last week to the 12-man jury, which needed only an hour and 52 minutes to decide that the Crown's story was the correct one. The verdict, guilty. Ontario Supreme Court Justice F.H. Barlow pronounced sentence. Solitary confinement until the 7th day of January, when you shall be taken to the place of execution and there hanged by the neck until dead. And the article noted that a woman had not been hanged in Canada in 11 years. The trial of Bohozik and Evelyn's father opened the next day and then was postponed because Evelyn refused to testify against them. Ultimately, Donald McLean would receive a sentence of 4 years for being an accessory after the fact in a murder and for stealing more than $200,000 from his former employer, the HSR.
In the 1940s? Damn.
Right. He was released from Kingston Penitentiary in 1951, and immediately prior to his release, he wrote to his former employer asking for his job back.
Ooh.
The HSR did not oblige his request.
Oh, shocking. Well, what about boyfriend Billy Boo Boo?
Right. Well, like you had asked earlier, you said there just didn't seem to be anything really to tie him into any of this except for her word, which, changed with the wind. So although Evelyn had implicated him in murdering John and baby Peter, after a year awaiting trial at the Barton Street Jail, it became clear that he wasn't involved in either. Evelyn claimed that Bohozik was Peter's father and killed the child, but Bohozik didn't even know her at the time of the pregnancy and the birth. He was acquitted of both killings for lack of evidence.
That's what I was like. Thought I was confused, so I didn't ask. But I was thinking, like, she made up this other dude that was supposedly baby daddy, and he was a complete figment of her imagination. But we didn't hear about Bobo for a lot longer. So it's like, was he even in the picture then to do it? All right. So for her part, then, did she get hung or hanged, and it's all over now?
No, not so much. So a young Toronto lawyer named J.J. Robinette emerged to successfully appeal Evelyn's case, arguing that her statements to police were improperly obtained. Another trial was ordered, and Dick was acquitted of the crimes charged against her relating to John Dick.
Evelyn Dick was acquitted?
That's correct.
Oh, come on. So she murdered her baby, cut her husband up and buried him and all this, and put the baby in the concrete in the attic, and she just walks away?
Yes and no.
Lawyers. Freaking lawyers.
So she did skate on the charges related to her husband completely. But baby Peter was another story. In the trial for the murder of Peter, her attorney brought in a psychiatrist who testified that Evelyn had endured a traumatic childhood and had the emotional mentality of a 13-year-old. At the conclusion of the trial, the jury found her guilty of a lesser charge of manslaughter, and the judge sentenced her to life imprisonment. And she was then transported to Kingston's Penitentiary for Women.
Okay, so did she then rot in jail until she died for killing this baby?
That's not exactly right either.
Oh, come on. Did she appeal that too? Or did they make her a lady or a lord or whatever and give her a place in the parliament? What the... Oh.
Evelyn Dick was paroled in 1958 after serving 11 years in the Kingston Penitentiary.
All right, I'm no math magician, but 11 years is a whole lot less than life. Were they using Common Core math up there in Canada back then?
Wait, there's more. So Miss Dick assumed a new identity and vanished into obscurity. The RCMP, that's the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, to whom she had to report regularly, respected her privacy. Evelyn was actually pardoned in 1985 and her file permanently sealed.
What?
Yeah, as a result of all of that, John Dick's murder has never been officially solved.
So they respect her privacy rather than actually supervise her and then pardon her? What the heck?
Yeah, and as part of that, like I said, the new identity thing. So she's just like nobody. Once she slipped out, like she had a whole new name, a whole new everything, and nobody knew who she was. And she could have been a school teacher or whatever. She could have done anything, and nobody would have been any the wiser.
I'll be damned.
And I just wanted to throw this at you at the end without you knowing it was coming. I guess, the way they roll up there in the Great White North, this case turned into this well-known schoolyard song.
What?
That goes like this. You cut off his legs, you cut off his arms, you cut off his head. How could you, Miss Dick? How could you, Miss Dick?
Are you sure that ain't a Cardi B song?
No, but apparently it did make its way into some music and pop culture and things like that. But I just can't imagine these little kids rolling around, and I would imagine little Canadian kids up there playing hockey and whatever. But instead, they're I guess they're playing their game and they're singing this.
I mean, a lot of kids' songs have strange origins, like "Ring Around the Rosie" and all that. But wow, or you're Lizzie Borden.
Yeah, that's true. I guess
40-some wax.
And that's a good point. A lot of people have compared this case to the Lizzie Borden case just because, it was early on. So it was hard to, prove directly exactly who did what, even though I think in this case, there's certainly a lot more, there's way more evidence and it's pretty clear who was involved in it, but it isn't necessarily, it was never proven exactly what Dad did, exactly what Evelyn's part in it was.
Right, but there's plenty of evidence that Evelyn was doing some wild stuff and disgusting stuff. And no doubt the way her parents started her out definitely did not help things.
Yeah, for sure. And you're talking about like pop culture and stuff. I was just looking it up real quick. So there's this band called the Forgotten Rebels who did a song called Evelyn Dick. And they use the schoolyard lyrics in their song.
Well, okay then.
Yeah, so there you go. There you have it. We probably can't use that in the episode because there's probably some royalty things or whatever. But if you're so inclined, you go check it out and listen to it for yourself.
Yeah, I'm sure that's copyrighted.
Alrighty then.
All right. So, moral of the story is don't be a dick. This episode was the suggestion of a listener. So thank you, Taffy. Taffy. Not good at pronouncing names, but thank you for the suggestion. It certainly was an interesting story. We're glad to do it. If anybody else out there has any cases that you'd like us to cover, hit us up on the socials. We're on all of them. We got the Bookface and the Gramster and Twitter X or whatever it is, that one that was a bird. Reach out to us on any one of them and let us know what you'd like to hear. Hey, thanks for hanging out with us on the Brothers in Crime podcast. Feedback and suggestions are always welcome. For links and resources related to this episode, please see the show notes or visit us at brothersincrimepodcast.com. We hope you'll save, subscribe, or bookmark us on your favorite podcast site and join us for the next episode.